Verse number 21. El anshe hatzava abayim lemilchama. There's a very famous Chovos Halvavos. Chovos Halvavos was a sefer that was written a long time ago, almost 1,000 years ago. And he says over there, the Chovos Halvavos is a sefer, it's a book that's supposed to turn us into better people. I don't know. Makes you wonder, right? But he says like this, that it's as if they're being told like this, you've come back from the war, you've come back victorious. But the real war is going to take place now. But you came back from the physical war and you did very good. But the real war of fighting against the Yetzer Hara, fighting against the evil inclination, that's going to start now. Right, what's the idea? The idea, of course, is very simple, because the more successful you are, so the more, it's called ga'ava, which is, it's normally translated as arrogance, but I'm not sure whether arrogance over here is quite the right way to describe it. But the more successful you are, the more you imagine that your success is coming from you. Which means it's not arrogance in the sense of you become an arrogant person and you become insufferable. Not always. Sometimes that happens as well. But it's more a case of, you think you can do it yourself.
Your ego.
Huh?
Your ego.
Your ego, yeah. There's a very famous pasuk that the Baal Shem Tov says. There's a pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Anochi omed bein chem or bein Hashem." I can't remember the exact lashon over there, but he says that Moshe says, "I'll stand in between you and God." And the simple understanding, of course, is that Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people that he'll be the conduit. You've got something to say to God, let me know and I'll pass it on. But the Baal Shem Tov says that what stands in between you and God is the anochi, the ego. Right? That the greater your ego, the more complicated it is for you to build a relationship with God, because what's the problem? God is bigger than you are. And a lot of people don't want to recognize that. At the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch it says there are some words four words which you may see them. Sometimes you see them up in the shul as well. It says Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, that I placed God in front of me always. So if you go into many shuls, you'll see that it's written up on the place where the shaliach tzibur, where the chazan stands and prays. So it's written up over there that the chazan should see Shiviti Hashem. You should have God, a picture of God in front of you, that you should know who you're davening to. You should know who you're praying to. But the emphasis is like this. There's something much deeper than that as well. Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. Why would that be at the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch? The Shulchan Aruch is a body of halacha. It's a body that teaches us how to, what we have to do every single day. You get up in the morning, this is what you have to do, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, that's not halacha. That's not, we're not being told that you can Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid or you can't Shiviti Hashem lenegdi. It's a title of some kind. But I think Pshat is very simple. I really do. I think Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid is coming to teach us that everything that we do needs to be founded on the fact that we place God in front of us. Because if God's ahead of you, that means God's more important than you are. If God's more important than you are, then you can adapt yourself to do what God wants you to do, rather than imagine that you can get away with doing what you want to do, and then you'll sort yourself out with God afterwards. Which means the Indian over here is it's very simple, right? The more successful a person is, the greater is his ability to imagine that he's pretty smart, that he does all these things by himself. You listen to businessmen; they're very interesting people. Businessmen. You listen to businessmen after they've had a successful deal. All they do is talk about how smart they were. I did this, and I did that, and I said that, and I said that. And when things go wrong, it's always, why did God do that to me? It's interesting, right? That success we always attribute to ourselves, but when things don't go right, then all of a sudden that can't be me, because obviously I'm perfect, which means that it must be that God's got it in for me, and why would that be? So says the Chovos Halvavos like this: you came back from the battle, you were successful in the battle, which is fantastic, right? But now, this is the idea, most incredible idea. What's he saying? Now you're going to have to battle against being successful. You have to battle not against being successful, but you have to battle success, to understand how to absorb success into your lives. And that's why, according to the Hasidim, they explain like this, that one of the things that we learned about the other day was that after they came back from the battle, the first thing they talked about was, if you take a look at Rabbi Scroll on the side, he says laws of koshering utensils. You bring back, utensils that they brought back, the booty that they brought back from the battle, right? So they've got these plates and they've got flatware and they've got all kinds of things over there that they need to be kashered in order to be able to be used by Jews. So by the Hasidim, they say, what's the connection between the two? They came back from battle, and the first thing they've got to learn is how to kasher utensils. And if you've got, if it was made with fire, you've got to use fire to purge it, and all those kinds of things. So explain the Hasidim like this: a very simple idea that they have to purge the gaiva, they have to purge the sense of arrogance from their bodies. They have to purge it out. It's hard. It's really hard.
It's almost like on the level of some kind of a korban.
Very much so. But who's the korban over here? Your ego is the korban. Kol davar sheyavoy be'esh ta'viru be'esh. That something that's made with fire needs to be kashered with fire. So again, by the Hasidim, what do they say? That we need to light the fire within inside of us. Like all of this is like a symbol. It's very symbolic. You can't. I hate to say this to you, I really do, but you can't be wishy-washy about your what's called avodat Hashem, about the way that you relate to God. You've got to have the most tremendous sense of being a fire, right? Being full of passion for what you want to do. It's not easy to do. Certainly not easy to do on a continual basis. Which means everybody has their moments of passion. Everybody has their moments when they feel that this is it, I got to connect to God and I'm going to do it and I don't care. The problem is what happens the next morning when you wake up. Now what? Right? And that's something which all of us have to work on. Right? Every single one of us has to work on that. It doesn't matter where we're holding and what we're doing, but that idea of knowing that this is what you want, that you've got a goal and you've got something that you want to aspire towards, and this is what you're going to do in order to be able to reach that point. So they're describing what happened when they went to the war, and they say like this: we went out to war like you told us to. And not one man is missing from the group that went out. So again, the simple understanding over here is what? That they had a very successful battle. They went out, they didn't lose any people on the way. The Gemara in Shabbos, right, in Tractate Shabbat, the Gemara says that it's talking about spiritually over here. Which means like this: they went out into battle. I don't know if you know how battles were waged in the olden days. They were a lot more exciting than they are nowadays. Like nowadays, battles are waged with people pressing buttons on computers somewhere, and smart bombs being sent off and doing all kinds of damage. In the olden days, they used to have a whole bevy of semi-naked women standing on the sides of the battleground trying to distract the enemy. The Gemara in Shabbos says like this: these people went out to war. Can you imagine they went out to war? Imagine what they were exposed to out there. It's not so Parshat, right? I'm not just talking about the semi-dressed cheerleaders on the sidelines, but also going out into war is something which is very, very spiritually detrimental. Things that happen in war, people behave in war in ways which they are completely and absolutely, anti-everything, immoral, anti-ethical, everything. But in war, all of a sudden, everything is different. So these people went out to war. Says the Gemara in Shabbos, they came back. Not only did they come back, they hadn't lost anybody, but nobody had lost their spiritual standing on the way. From the Talmud is learning what it's learning, because the language that's used over here is a little bit enigmatic. Why doesn't it say that no one was killed, right? Or no one was lost? What is this idea of no one nifkad, that no one's missing? Why would you expect somebody, when you go to battle, it's true that people go AWOL in battle, right? But the truth of the matter, when you're sending out righteous people like this, you're not really expecting anybody to desert. Which means when they come back, they should come back and they say nobody was killed. It was a very successful battle. Why are they using this word of nifkad? So the Gemara is learning out from that nifkad means that we're talking in spiritual terms over here. So again, the Nesiva Shalom, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes from the previous generation, he writes like this, that the sign of a true leader is somebody who's able to retain their spiritual standing even in very, very difficult moments, in very difficult times. If you listen to the context of the words, again, we're talking about, a 12,000 or 13,000 army that went out, 13,000 people army that went out, made up of righteous people. Which means, the idea of the Torah using the word missing is a little bit incongruous. It's not something which you would imagine that it would use. Again, you would imagine that it would come back and say nobody died. I think here, you know what? I'll bring you a proof from later on in Tanakh, right? It says by the conquest when Yoshua went into the land of Israel, and they went to Jericho and they succeeded in Jericho, and somebody took some spoils which they weren't supposed to take, even though they've been commanded by God not to. And then they went to a city called Ai. And over there in Ai, so either one person died or 36 people died. The Gemara is not quite sure, because the Gemara says that the one person who died may have been somebody of such incredible spiritual stature that he had the weight of 36, righteous people, whatever it is. But the reaction of the soldiers is very interesting. The soldiers come back to Yoshua and they say, look, we've got no problem going off to fight, but you never told us anyone was going to die. Here you see what Rashi, I'll come back to what I was saying in a moment. Rashi's saying that the word nifkad, from bringing three different sources inside of Tanakh, Rashi's saying that the word nifkad is definitely referring to something it's whole. Everything is whole. Nobody's been lost. Right? What the Gemara is adding over here is that nobody was lost, not just physically, but spiritually as well, which means they're completely whole when they come back.
But they still have to kasher their utensils.
They still have to kasher their utensils. We'll get to that. We'll get to that as well in a minute, right?
But
for sure.
They were also awarded a lot of the booty.
Yeah, which means like this, that they're picking up reward for having done what they did. That's for sure. The question over here has got nothing to do with the way that the Jewish people, the way that Moshe is relating to the people coming back. It's to do with how they relate to themselves. How do they look at themselves? How did they come back? So the Gemara is saying they came back whole. What we see, though, is that the people themselves are unhappy about the fact that they went into war, and maybe there was some residue of something left over, some kind of spiritual residue, something negative left over, which is why they want to go through a process of purification for themselves. We live. I tell you something. The most incredible thing. There was a rabbi from the previous generation, somebody called Levenstein, who was he was in the Mir, and there's a very famous story about the Mir yeshiva in the Second World War that they managed to cross through Russia, the Trans-Siberian Railway, which was built by one of the Tsars. I can't remember which one, Tsar Nikolai, whatever, the second or the third or something. And it cost billions of rubles to build, and it cost thousands of lives as well. It took years to build. He got this thing in his head that he wants a railroad that's going to traverse the whole of Russia. And it cost billions of rubles, and it cost thousands of lives that were lost whilst this thing was being laid down. And it served no purpose whatsoever. It was just one of these incredible white elephants that the monarchy decided they had to have, and it makes no difference. And for years and years, this thing was it wasn't used. It was just there. Nobody was using this train to get from one end of Russia to the other. In the end, interestingly enough, the Mir Yeshiva managed to get onto that train, and it took them across Russia into Japan. They got to Kobe in Japan. And Rav Chatzkel Levenstein said that here, now it became clear why God planted this idea in the head of the Tsar that he's got to have this ridiculous railroad, was in order to allow Jews to escape during the Second World War in order to get to safety. From Kobe they went to Shanghai, from Shanghai they went to America, and after Rav Chatzkel Levenstein had been in America for a little while, he decided that he wanted to come to Israel. So when they asked him why, one of the reasons that he gave for wanting to leave America, the Mir Yeshiva had established itself in Brooklyn, and he was a mashgiach over there, and a very, very dominant, very forceful personality. And when they asked him why he wanted to give it up and come to America, to come to Israel, he said, because it takes me half an hour to walk from my apartment to the yeshiva each day.
In the States?
In the States, in Brooklyn. May not sound like such a big deal, right? Except that Rav Chatzkel lived about 3 buildings away from the yeshiva. So when his Talmidim asked him, they said to Rabbi, how can that be? He says, because it takes me half an hour to prepare myself to go out into the streets of America. It's hard for us to relate to something like that. We go out in the streets, we're not particularly moved by what we see, so we see things that we shouldn't see. Maybe people not dressed the way they should be dressed. Maybe we hear things we shouldn't hear. But it doesn't affect us in an obvious way. Rav Chatzkel Levenstein, that affected him. To go out into the streets of America, he felt that it was making some kind of a negative impact on his spiritual being. So I'll tell you something which, again, is going to be very hard to understand. But the level that Rav Chatzkel Levenstein was on, that's the real level. The level that we're on, where we imagine that we can go out into the streets and we won't be affected by what we see, that's not good. It means that there's some kind of a shell that's been built around our neshama, around our soul, that's stopping us from being able to tap into it properly. Which means we need to learn how to be more spiritually sensitive, that's for sure. These people went out to war, they came back, they were successful. The Gemara attests to the fact that they came back and they were spiritually unharmed by what had happened, and yet they were bothered. They were bothered by the fact that they'd been in an environment which wasn't spiritually conducive, and they wanted to try to do something in order to draw themselves upwards. Says in the Siva Shalom, that's a sign of a real leader. A real leader is somebody who's concerned. He's concerned about his spiritual well-being. He's concerned about, what he's experiencing. He's concerned about how he's going to help other people. The more spiritually in tune we are, the greater is our ability to help. That's what it comes down to, right? The better is our ability to be able to give over to other people, what it is that we're trying to live. There's a very beautiful story they once made in Poland. They once made a very, very draconian law against Jewish education. And they asked the Chofetz Chaim, one of the greatest rabbis, died just before the Second World War, one of the greatest rabbis who certainly lived over the last 500 years. They asked the Chofetz Chaim to go to the Polish Minister of Education in order to plead the case for Jewish education. Chofetz Chaim didn't speak any Polish. So he went together with another rabbi who spoke Polish, and the Chofetz Chaim made an impassioned plea to the Polish Minister of Education in Yiddish. And as the rabbi who was there started to translate it into Polish, the Polish Minister of Education, who was not Jewish and didn't understand any Yiddish, he says, you don't have to translate. He said it was clear, things that were coming out of his heart, it was clear what he was trying to say. And they nullified the law. The more spiritual we are, the greater is our ability to have an impact on people that are less spiritual than we are. But in order to do that, we've got to want to be spiritual. That needs to be a fundamental need, a fundamental desire for each person needs to be to want to be more spiritual, to want to be more connected to God. However that translates itself. Here, verse number 50, what does it say? And these soldiers that have come back now, these righteous soldiers that have come back, what did they do? They offer up a sacrifice to God. What kind of a sacrifice? So we would have thought, if I asked you what kind of sacrifice you think they're offering up, we would have said, obviously, thanksgiving. They've been to war and they've come back. And yet, what does the pasuk say? L'chaper nafshoseinu lifnei Hashem, in order to atone for the souls, their souls, right, for whatever has happened to them. But they didn't sin. They went out to battle and they came back without sinning, right? And what did the Gemara say? The Gemara said that they came back and they were whole. So says the Chidush Harim, listen to this. The Chidush Harim is one of the great Hasidic rabbis. He's the first of the Gera dynasty, the first Rebbe of Gur. Says the Chidush Harim, they wanted to bring a sacrifice because they thought about sinning.
When?
Out on the battlefield. Right, when you've got there's a halacha of an Eishes Yifas Torah, which is this woman of beautiful form, right, that they used to send out these people onto the battlefields in order to try to distract you. and there's all kinds of laws over there about what you can do and what you can't do, right? But the bottom line is that you're being distracted by something which is, it's very distractful. It really is. Right? If you've got partially dressed women, prancing around in front of you. I'm looking around the room here right now, right? And I think that most of you are having enough trouble concentrating on what's going on without half-dressed naked women dancing around, right? Methinks if we had that kind of a background over here, then maybe you'd be concentrating on that instead of concentrating on me at all. No?
Yeah.
It's possible, right? It's a possibility, for sure, right? So they went out to war and they didn't sin, they didn't do anything. But nevertheless, they had sinful thoughts. So says the Chidush Yarim, even for that, they wanted to come and they wanted to bring sacrifices. Right, now, under normal circumstances, you don't bring a sacrifice for having sinful thoughts. Bring a sacrifice. If you want to bring a sin offering, you bring it because you did something you shouldn't have done. But if a person thought about it and didn't do it, we would say the opposite. No, if somebody has a sinful thought and they don't do it, that person's obviously, he's in good shape, no? And yet these people they were bothered by the fact that they had thoughts that they shouldn't have had. Maybe that's pshat. You need to know a little bit of Hebrew grammar over here. But the last two words of the pasuk, it says that they brought the sacrifice, the chapel nafsheinu lifnei Hashem. But what does that mean, lifnei Hashem? It should say a korban la Hashem, that they're bringing a korban to God. What do you mean, lifnei Hashem? They brought it before God. This was their korban. Their thoughts were the korban. That's a sacrifice that they were bringing.
Why lifnei and not bifnei?
And not bifnei? The emphasis is that in biblical grammar, bet and lamed are very often interchangeable. But the idea over here is something is really what you were referring to before, right? Which is what? That when they're coming over here and they bring the physical sacrifice that they're bringing is that that's just a small detail within what they're really bringing. What are they really bringing? They're bringing their thoughts. They shouldn't have had these thoughts, so they're bringing them instead. You should know that the Ramban Nachmanides says that one of the concepts of bringing a korban, of bringing a sacrifice, is that a person has to recognize that when you've sinned, that's really you that's supposed to be sacrificed. God doesn't want human sacrifices, so we transfer ourselves and we bring an animal sacrifice instead. That's one of the reasons, says the Ramban, that we put our hands on top of the animal and we push down. It's as if we're transferring our sins onto the animal. Of course, it's got to be done with the right kavanah, with the right intent. Otherwise, it's not really working properly. But you hear the idea that the physicality of the korban, of the sacrifice, of the offering, that's just a minor detail inside of everything. The most important thing over here is what? That you're trying to rectify the mistake that was made.
Tashlich in Rosh Hashanah.
Tashlich on Rosh Hashanah. Kaparot, right? On Rosh Hashanah, taking a chicken away. You should know that some people were very much against it. Right? Why were they against it? Because they thought that if people wave a chicken around their heads, or they take their crumbs and they throw them into the river, that's it. I've done my bit. No, you haven't done your bit. This is all symbolic, which means that you've got to be aware of what you've done. You've got to be aware of what it means in order to be able to reach a level where you're prepared to connect together with God. If you're just swinging the rooster around your head, or you're just throwing the crumbs into the river, then what have you done? You haven't achieved anything. The emphasis is like this. I'll bring you a proof for just how ridiculous that mindset is. Because what happens to all of these chickens and roosters, what happens to them all that are used for kaparot? They're then slaughtered and they're given out to the poor people to eat. But what are we saying? I'm transferring my sins onto this rooster and then some poor guy down the road is going to eat my sins. That makes any sense? That's ridiculous, isn't it?
They would.
Which is the whole thing is, it's only symbolic. What you're really doing is that you're recognizing the fact that you've sinned and that you need to draw closer to God, and you're now accruing more mitzvahs through that recognition. What are you doing? You're now giving yourself more mitzvahs. So you're giving out. This chicken's going to be given out, and now you've just done stock. You've done charity, And that means that you're going to walk into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with another mitzvah under your belt. Again, it's the same with Tashlich. What do? You take these bread and you take your breadcrumbs and you throw them into where? Into the river. And then next week when you eat gefilte fish, what are you doing? Right? You're not just eating your sins back, you're eating everyone else's as well, right? Okay, here, one last idea. We'll finish with this in Mitzvah Hashem for today. At the end of the Parshat, we spoke about this over the last few days. We've got a fascinating dialogue over here between Moshe Rabbeinu and the tribes of Gad and Reuven. Gad and Reuven come to Moshe Rabbeinu and they say, we've got lots and lots of flocks and we don't know what to do with them. We don't want to go into the land of Israel because there's not enough space for them. Where we are right now, it's very fertile, it's very green, there's lots of pasture land. That's where we want to stay over here. And there's a whole dialogue over there, backwards and forwards, between Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is very upset with them. He says they're putting the emphasis on the wrong thing. They're putting it on the physicality, on the material side. They're not putting it on the spiritual side. So finally they reach a point where Moshe is okay with them staying on the other side of the Jordan. But it comes with a condition. They've got to go in, they've got to fight, they've got to agree to that, and if they don't agree to that, then it's taken away from them. At the end of all of this, Moshe Rabbeinu turns around to the tribes of Gad and of Reuven, and he throws in half of the tribe of Manasseh as well. So yesterday we spoke about that. We spoke about the idea of why half of the tribe of Manasseh was being thrown in. What's the connection? The Ramban, right? Moshe, you pointed out yesterday that the Ramban points out that the tribe of Moshe Rabbeinu asks anybody, is there anyone else here who wants to stay on the other side of the Jordan? And Manasseh say, we do. Right, so half of Manasseh went over to the other side of the Jordan. So I saw a fascinating idea. There's a thread which threads together Reuven, Gad, and Manasseh. They are all firstborn. Right, Reuven is the firstborn to his mother. Right, Gad is the firstborn to his mother, and Manasseh is the firstborn to his mother. So I saw a very interesting idea when Yaakov Avinu, when Jacob blesses Reuven, he tells him he's Pachaz Kamayim. Pachaz Kamayim means that you are as stable as water. You realize, right, that water is not a very stable thing. You know, water just does whatever it does, that's what it does. Right? Water has no form. Right? You pour it into a bottle, it looks like a bottle. You pour it into a bathtub, it looks like a bathtub. You know, it doesn't have any form of its own. When Yaakov Avinu is saying to Reuven that you are Pachaz Kamayim, what he's really saying is that you are too impetuous. You don't think things through properly. Malleable, maybe, but I think it's more than Pachaz Kamayim is more than malleable. Pachaz Kamayim, malleable means that somebody's already working on you, right? Pachaz Kamayim is that I'm just whatever I'm gonna. That's what I'm going to be. Whatever's going to come out, that's what will be, right? Reuven, Gad, and Manasseh are all firstborns. And what do? They all come and say that they want to be on the other side of the Jordan River. They want to stay on the other side and not go into the land of Israel. And all of them are sorry after they go into the land of Israel and they see how fertile the land of Israel is and how beautiful it is. They're all sorry that they asked what they asked. It's interesting. One of the things that a person loses when you live in Chutz La'aretz, when you're a farmer living in Chutz La'aretz, when you live outside of Israel, you miss out on a certain mitzvah. It's a mitzvah called Bikurim. What is Bikurim? It's a very beautiful mitzvah. The first fruits that grow on a tree have to be brought to Yerushalayim, and a great big fuss is made of all the farmers that are bringing them, and they're brought to the Kohanim they're brought to the Kohanim in the temple. And it's a very, very significant moment in the agricultural year. Somebody who lives outside of Israel doesn't bring Bikurim. There is no mitzvah. What Gad and Reuven and half of the tribe of Manasseh, what they lost out on by going to live on the other side of the Jordan was the mitzvah of Bikurim. The one thing that you need to have in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Bikurim is you need to have patience. Right? What do? You watch this tree. All of a sudden, buds start appearing on your tree, and you've got to tie little red threads around the buds to know that these are the first fruits that are going to appear, and you've got to wait, and you've got to nurture, and you've got to irrigate, and you've got to tend, and after a while, quite a while, the fruits begin to appear, and then the fruits begin to grow, and then they become ripe, and only after this whole process are you able to pick them off the tree and to bring them to Jerusalem, which means that the mitzvah of Bikurim is a mitzvah which requires tremendous patience. The mitzvah that was taken away from the tribes of Gad and Reuven and Manasseh was the mitzvah of Bikurim because they showed a lack of patience. Right? Impetuosity and patience don't go together with each other. Okay, we're going to stop over here in Mitzvah Hashem. Everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat.